You're listening to Driving Performance, your go-to podcast for unmatched expertise in the world of buying and selling an automotive dealership. Each episode features discussions with industry leaders and is brought to you by Performance Brokerage Services, North America's premier, family-owned automotive dealership brokerage firm with over 30 years of experience. We're here to ensure you gain the most reliable insights to confidently navigate a transaction and accomplish your unique goals. Whether you're looking to buy or sell, we prioritize building lasting relationships and maximizing the value beyond the transaction level. Here are your hosts, Jamie Farley and Paul Keckney, for another segment of Shifting Gears.
Welcome to Driving Performance. Today, we're diving into one of the most crucial aspects of dealership acquisitions, and that is navigating the OEM application and approval process. So whether you are a seasoned dealer or a first-time buyer, getting approval from the OEM can sometimes feel like threading a needle. So to help us break it all down, we have a true expert in the field with us today.
That's right. Greg Gilmore, President and CEO of Apex Group. Greg, so happy to have you on the show. Greg really likes to spearhead the relationship between the OEM and the buyer or applicant and works through with the buyer the process of the OEM application. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Paul. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
Greg, we're very excited about hearing all of your insights on this topic, but before we get into the details, let's just start with the basics. For those who aren't familiar with the Apex Group, can you break down what you do for your clients?
Sure, absolutely. No, we work basically on behalf of the buyers for the most part, and we work through all the myriad of paperwork that the manufacturers put together for an application package. And we do some, those are for buy sells. We also do a little bit of open point work also. We haven't done as much of that lately, but we still do that. But that's basically it. I mean, everything that we do is more of a market rep type activity for the dealer. So ownership change packages is really the key. So yeah, we just try to break it down for them and get through that paperwork.
Greg, could you walk us through some of the challenging things you run into when a buyer is going through that application process, things that are challenging for the buyer with the OEM?
Yeah, absolutely. There's really two types of client or two types of buyers that we work with. I mean, like you mentioned before in the beginning, there's a seasoned buyer, and that's really probably 80% of who we work with. We've had clients for 20, 25 years that have multiple dealerships, 20, 25, maybe 30 stores. And those buyers are a little bit different than the first-time buyers and what they're looking for. So what they're looking for, our seasoned or multi-dealer buyers, they're looking for something, their packages to be done quickly and accurately, and they don't run into the challenges that we have with the first-time buyers, which is more, if you're looking at, roadblocks or challenges, it's experience, proven experience and capital, which we run more, that's going to be more on the first-time buyer. So like our existing dealers, we work with, the key is the challenges might be because they have so many dealerships, there's so many different performance metrics that they have to put together for the manufacturer. So like a manufacturer may want everything that the dealer, all their performance metrics, which would be like sales efficiency or customer satisfaction reports, financial statements, et cetera. So for those dealers, we work with, we'll actually put together for our clients, we'll hold all their performance reports once a year. They'll send us out everything they have, and we keep that on file for them. Whether they're buying a store or not, we have that ready to go, and they can use that information as a profile, and they can, because sometimes when they're buying a store, the buyer wants to know a little bit about the dealership group also. So those dealers will provide the performance and show them that they can be approved pretty quickly. That's a big part of being approved as a car dealer, is being able to prove that you're a good dealer. And that's where the performance reports come in. So in the statements, but for the newer, the first time buyer, which we work with, I'd say maybe 20%, or it's a little bit more challenging because we have to establish that they don't always have the track record in a new car franchise, depending. They don't always have the performance reports or all the metrics that the manufacturers need. And they might not have the capital set up either, and they don't understand the capital. So those are the challenges, making sure the capital and the experience both are presented to the manufacturer where they can be approved.
Mm-hmm. And what are those key metrics specifically? You mentioned sales effectiveness, but can you just expand on that a little bit? Like, what are the OEMs really looking for in terms of, hey, your performance, Mr. or Mrs. Dealer is at, XYZ level, and that meets our requirements. What does that look like?
Yeah, and sales efficiency is probably the key. That's probably the big one. The two are going to be, well, three really. What's going to be your sales efficiency, your customer satisfaction, service retention. That can be a big one. Financial statements too, if you have ownership, previous ownership when you're buying a store. But sales efficiency, all the manufacturers look at that. I would say that's the most important part. And 100% effective is 100% is your effective. But there are different degrees of where you can be in that, and depending on also how many stores you have. If you have 30 stores, I mean, not all of them are probably going to be sales effective. There's going to be a few that will be below. But what happens in those situations, there's not always a hard and fast rule on where you need to be, like, where they're going to grade you on those reports. But if you're not effective, I think most manufacturers want to see why. Is there a reason why you're not sales efficient? And what are you going to do in the future to become sales efficient at your current dealership? And what are you going to do for my franchise too? So those are the aspects there on the sales efficiency. And then you have customer satisfaction, which changes a lot over the years. I mean, we've been doing this, I've been doing it over 25 years outside of the manufacturer. And I can tell you that customer satisfaction reports, the way they grade them, and so it changes all the time. But basically, at the end of the day, on all these reports, whether it's customer satisfaction or sales efficiency, they want a benchmark number. And they want to see that where you're at in relation to that benchmark. And that benchmark can be a national average, zone average, regional average, sometimes district average. But that's what they're looking for, to see where you're at. You can't just say, oh, I'm a such and such number and give it to them. They want to see where you're at in relation. And that's more on customer satisfaction and retention. But sales efficiency is a grade of your actual sales compared to registrations in the market. And that, depending on how big the market is drawn, it's going to be on a certain primary market area where they define it. So.
Mhm. Well, Toyota, I'd worked for Toyota for many years, and they had moved away from customer satisfaction and moved to customer retention. Have you seen the other OEMs do that as well? Move to the retention, since it's just a better number overall to kind of measure that customer loyalty.
Well, I'll tell you what I've seen over 20 years is that you move from this back to this, back to this, back to, I mean, Toyota's gone through 4 or 5 different green light, red light, and scores, not scores, going dark. I mean, there's been so many changes in the industry with customer satisfaction. So, but to answer your question, yes, retention, I don't see it as much. I see it with some of the Koreans, Hyundai, Kia. Look at service retention. They actually have a grading scale where you have to be at a certain number pass before they let you move on too. So, whereas Toyota might not have a hard and fast rule all the time. I mean, they look at things on a case by case sometimes. I mean, there are manufacturers that and then it changes. I mean, it always changes. It evolves. But, and I think it's important that if you're not at a certain level, that you have a good explanation on why and what you're doing to move forward. Because, I mean, by definition, you're not going to be, half the dealers are going to be 100% effective, half of them aren't going to be 100% effective. I mean, everybody's not going to be 100% sales effective. So you really need to have a plan on where you're at and what you're doing, and looking at the trends too. But yes, customer retention is very important. So.
You seeing one of the things that came up, or I heard you say, regarding balance sheet. So day one balance sheet. What are you seeing today as far as working capital requirements? Because, quite often a buyer will say, well, we just use the seller's number, but that's not a fact. I mean, I remember when I first started in this industry, they were talking about how it was 3 months worth of expenses. What are you seeing the OEMs? How do they come up with that number today?
That's a good question. And it changes too among OEMs, because there's really two schools of thought when it comes to working capital from OEMs. You have some manufacturers that give you that number up front, and they say, this is what it is. And it's based on planning volume typically. And sometimes they have a number, per new vehicle retailed, multiply that out, whether it's $1,500 a car, $2,000, and they say, this is your working cap. It's based on what we project we think you should sell in the market. There's some manufacturers like that. There are other manufacturers that'll base it on a forecast that you go forward. And it can be very intricate too, those numbers. Some of them publish them, some of them don't publish those numbers. But what I can tell you is when you're forecasting, there really isn't a big reason to be a hero, when you're laying these numbers out, because at the end of the day, it's going to move your working cap number up typically. The exception to that rule is if it's a manufacturer with a low day supply and you're trying to get allocation, there's a fine line there. You definitely want to, make sure the numbers are up enough, but you don't want to push your working cap up. And that can be handled in a different way also with sometimes with pre-owned too, because cost of sales, to answer your question, Paul, cost of sales of pre-owned is probably one of the largest drivers of working cap all the way across the board. So even if they're giving you something up front, I still would be careful on your used car projections, because there really isn't, there's not a lot of upside to that on going high on used.
Well, and as long as you're profitable and you're hitting your sales effectiveness in your business plan, I'm guessing used cars are kind of secondary to the manufacturer anyway, right?
It is. And it's been strange the last couple of years too, because with product, the way it is, we've had some manufacturers, even when you forecast sales efficiency or planning volume, they still ask you to back it down because of production. So we've had that on some manufacturers, which is different. It's never really been like that. I've never seen that before in 20, 30 years, but that is something that's out there. But yeah, that is true. I mean, it's you do want to forecast, but the first part of what you said too is there is some validity to checking what the current dealer's working cap requirement is, because when you're talking to a buyer and they're trying to figure out how much money do I need to buy a dealership at the beginning stage, it's not a bad rule of thumb to look at what the existing working cap requirement is. And if you understand that they're below in their sales numbers, then you can definitely increase that number out to maybe a percentage. But you need a starting point for that, and that's where it is. I would caution you though too when you do pull those numbers, because the working cap requirements that are shown on the statements, financial statements for the dealers, are typically inputted, by the controller of that dealer. And if they're not updated, then you could be working off an old number. So that's not always accurate, but it's a good question to ask when you're doing due diligence. I would always ask that, what is the current working cap? Because it's, no matter what, it's good to know what the manufacturer's coming back with, in case, let's say they come back with a number that's double and you're going, wait a second, this is way out of line compared to where they were. Maybe you have a little bit of room there to at least have a discussion. So
great point.
So building on the capital piece, can you give us your expertise on what buyers, I guess, should expect for like a source of funds review? Because that can sometimes be very, very thorough depending on the OEM. And even for a seasoned buyer, sometimes they, especially if their structure's more complex with, holding companies and different sources of where the funds are coming from. And then also for first-time buyers, what are you seeing? And I guess what would be advice that you would give for what to expect in the process?
Yeah, well, with source of funds, I mean, you got to look at where that's going to come from first. I mean, before you get to source of funds, you really want to look at your total operating investment, and to do that, you need that working cap guide, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need the goodwill or whatever the blue sky is in the APA that you'd come up with, and you need fixed assets. So you need those three numbers, and then you probably need to take those three numbers and work an opening day balance sheet and see where everything fits within that manufacturer's debt to equity policy. So once you have that done, then I think you can start pulling that source of funds question a little bit, fine tuning that a little bit better. Because once you know your total operating investment, once you know what the manufacturer's policy is on debt to equity and working cap guide, which is part of that first part, then you can see what that number is. And then once you get to that point, you can decide how do I get there? I mean, you have a certain equity component that you have to put in the dealership. You're allowed to borrow some debt and capital loan to put on that dealership. But the question becomes then, okay, my personal investment, that's where a lot of the source of funds comes from. I mean, you have commitment letters for your financing, but we're talking right now, I think the question is your personal source of funds for the cash equity portion of that dealership. How do you plan for that? You've got the criteria is a verification. You have to verify that money. They want to see where it is. Some manufacturers want to see 3 months. Toyota, where you were at, that's 3 months. Hyundai, Kia want to see 3 months. Ford wants to see 3 months. Other manufacturers like General Motors and Chrysler want to see 1 month statement, and you might have that closer to closing. But we can talk about that too, as far as timing goes, when that should come in. But the source of funds, and there can be some personal borrowing too. So you may have some personal borrowing. Really, if you look at source of funds, there's really three things it can be, right? I mean, you can have cash equity, which you verify that with your bank statements or your brokerage fund statements, IRAs, whatever, that's that. Or you can borrow. And so you might have, if it's personal, you might have a home equity or something. I mean, for first time buyers, we see that. Or what happens too on some of these first time buyers is you might have a gift letter, and a manufacturer will look at that gift letter as cash because there's no encumbrance to it. And that's what a gift letter is. It tells you, or the gift letter states that there is no payback on this, therefore it is equity. And so it goes back into the equity source. So that's really your source of funds. You figure out your source of funds, and then you verify your source of funds and provide that verification to the manufacturer. I don't know how far down in the weeds we want to get, but like, for example, with you ask for differences sometimes, and like Ford will ask for those 3 months, and you lay those 3 months out, those 3 months of statements. But if one of those statements is below the number, it'll all kick back. So all three of those have to, so like you can't just provide 3 statements and the third one being 120% of what you need. If that middle one is 80%, that first one's 120% of what you need, that middle one's 80, and that third one's 120, they'll kick it back. They want all of them to be over 100% of what their source was.
Sure.
And I've seen that come up before here recently too. So that's definitely something to be aware of.
Yeah. Well, I would see that, when reviewing Toyota packages too, if I'm looking at bank statements and there's 3 months worth and 1 month had this really sizable deposit, then it's okay, where did that source come from? And then it kind of just extends into just another review of, okay, where did that money come from? And it kind of goes on. The questions continue to happen with the buyer.
And Toyota does a good job. I was with Toyota too. Toyota does a good job of following. What they say, follow every branch of the tree. I think that was what you.
Right.
So, and that's what happens if they follow it. But yeah, I mean, but even like, I don't know, I've seen them just be a couple dollars under, and for dealers that have the capital. So I'm just saying, if they're going to do that for dealers that have the net worth. The other thing on that source of funds too, just one last thing on that. So we talked about the opening day balance sheet. We talked about verifying with bank statements, but it also needs to be consistent with your personal financial statement that goes with the application. So that's the
Good
third
point.
component. So make sure everything is consistent and accurate. So on these packages, I think that's what you see sometimes is we talk about roadblocks. I mean, not being accurate the first time is just a killer on these deals. You have to be accurate and give all the information in a nice professional manner.
So question for you, because I can't tell you how many times I've told a potential buyer that you've got to have 50-50 cash on cash or unencumbered funds, if you want to call it that. But for a buyer and not a seasoned buyer that maybe has 1-2 stores, I have seen it most recently that although the manufacturer is okay with those terms, the banks aren't. Are you seeing that as well, where the banks sometimes will ask, let's say it's an underperforming store or store losing money, even if you build a pro forma, the commitment letter isn't coming in the way we want it to. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, and banks change often. I mean, their criteria changes a lot more than the manufacturers. Manufacturers' criteria, and that's pretty much, we do some lending packages, but most of our work is with the manufacturers. But I do see it. I have visibility just like you do, Paul. Like floor plan, I mean, it changes a lot. I mean, the criteria on the underwriting on floor plan will change. So yeah, there are differences. You might be fine with and I see it the other way too. I mean, I see like, a certain bank will lend, 80% on it, and we can only go to 50, like you said, to 50-50. And they say, well, we got to dial that back down. You got to come up with the equity because the manufacturer has the final say on that franchise. So yeah, I mean, it goes both ways.
Let me ask you this. Over the years, you get some buyers who will get their package done literally in weeks, and then others, it takes a long time. What stands out for you if I'm a buyer, to keep the process moving, to stay engaged with the manufacturer, good communicate? What creates this shorter term to get approved?
Yeah, there is a difference in timing, and I see that with our clients even. It really comes down, I don't know if it's procrastination, but I think at the beginning of the process, we come across this all the time because, first thing we do with our clients is we lay out a checklist of all the items that are necessary. When you look at that checklist, it could be 50 items on there. You get overwhelmed fast and you just kind of push that off to the side and you start working on something else. So while we need to make sure they understand, or we need our clients understand everything that's required, we still break things out into blocks where the most important things first, and then we can kind of fill in as we go. And so I do want, and then the other thing too is some manufacturers, you're probably aware of this, they won't send out the entire checklist at the beginning either. They'll send it out in waves or stages. And you may not they want to get you be approved in a certain stage, or one manufacturer, for example, Honda. I mean, Honda wants to see that attorney's letter up real quick at the beginning of the process so they can get an idea on how they build their dealer agreement and the information that they need based on the attorney's letter. So they hold documents, not all the time, but I've seen it where they'll hold documents until they get that, and then they see what the structure is, and then we'll say, okay, it's an LLC, we need this, we need this, we need that. I guess the key is, and for us, for our clients, we know we work, how do you say, I was with Toyota and Jamie years ago, and I probably had this over 25 years now, 1998. And so we've seen everybody. We know what they're asking for. We know Chrysler's going to come in waves. We know Nissan might come in waves. So we know what the next pieces will be. So we give that to them up front. But to keep that package moving, you just got to let's get the big parts done. Let's get that personal app in, and let's get those background checks done quickly. Let's get that pro forma done first, because that pro forma is going to target the rest or everything's going to fall from that. The source of funds that Jamie was talking about before, the opening day balance sheet that you're talking about, all that stuff happens once we get the projections done and we can get a firm working cap requirement. Because we don't have the working cap requirement, we might not know what the source of funds really are going to be. We have an idea, but so I guess to answer that question, make sure you're taking care of the pro forma first at the very beginning of the process, and the personal apps so they can do their background checks. And we can talk about apps more if you want, or on what's important with those. But I would say just stay on it. You got a mountain of paperwork every day. Be sending something. Don't hold it. Don't wait and send everything at the end or some other. If you've got something done, send it. Or at least what we do is they get it. We take a look at it, make sure it's okay, and then we draft it back and they send it on. But don't hold anything. Just keep it going. Keep it.
Yep. I would always tell the dealers, just piecemeal it to me. Just don't hold on to it. You don't have to save and submit it all at once, because that actually makes it harder for the person on the other side to kind of go through it all.
The other thing about that too is if you hold it, or if you're not, let's say if you're one of those that do procrastinate, the market rep manager, like James said, they're busy and they're gonna prioritize the deals that they're on their desk based on information that's coming in. So if you're waiting, you may have everything done and ready to go, and then you're ready to go, but they're not ready to go because you've been sitting on it for 2-3 weeks. And then all of a sudden you want everything to be done tomorrow. It's not going to happen that way, especially the last 3 years. I mean, there's so many deals since COVID going on. There's buyers in the market, there's sellers in the market. There's a lot of packages going on. I think that's going to continue to. I haven't seen a slowdown. So yeah, Paul, just get the paperwork in early, start sending information, and make sure it's accurate.
Yeah, no, that's a great point to make. When you're working with your clients and you're talking about timing from submission to the OEM for approval, in your mind, what is the average? What is really great? Hey, we won, we got it over the finish line in this amount of time. And what is just taking too long and dragging on?
Yeah, I mean, it still gets back to that first part of just getting in what you can. But as far as timeframes go, it also depends on it. Some of our clients, they may have 7 or 8 of one, or not, a lot of one franchise, and so they're going to probably move a little bit quicker because they know them and they're ready to go and they don't have to go through the process. But everybody wants everything done in 30 days. Here's the kicker on that. It's not always the manufacturer. It can be the floor plan. So to answer that, even going back to that first question, you can be doing everything you can for the manufacturer, but if you're not simultaneously working on that floor plan, then you're going to be stuck at the end, because the floor plan could take just as long as the manufacturer. So, but yeah, it can be done in 30 days. I mean, it can be done in 2 weeks. I've seen it, but most of them are 60, and sometimes they extend to 90. Once you started getting into the extensions, it becomes very dangerous. I mean, y'all know better than I do. Sellers
Yeah.
are going to start getting cold
Yeah.
feet at some point,
Mm-hmm.
and calling to get that extension. I don't think that would be. I've never had to call somebody for an extension, but I can't imagine. I don't think the sellers like to do that. So you want to get it done the first
Yep.
time.
Well, and Greg, you and I have been together on a few where we've got a soft turn down because they didn't get the information in on time. And certainly I can't imagine it works well for a typical buyer either, where they've already set the stage that they're not performing in a standard fashion, I guess you call it that.
Yeah, it depends on the states too. Different states will go faster than others on that. Some of it's they have 60 days, and then they'll say, well, they're turning it down even quicker because they don't have time to review. So there's just different areas there. Yeah, nobody wants that letter, but it happens a lot. And you know what? It happens a lot too because of floor plan. You don't have that commitment letter or bankings. You might have your apps in, your business plans done, your pro formas, all your legal documents, but you don't have that floor plan in. You're still going to get that soft turn down because you need that. And so all pieces have to be in.
Is there anything else that you are seeing out there or would just like buyers in general to know about that we haven't touched on yet?
No, but I mean, when you look at buyers, and I think I'll talk about first time buyers. It's a little bit more challenging than somebody who has a big group. But when I look at first time buyers, there are really like three types of first time buyers. So you have the general manager that's worked very hard in the dealership, and they want to buy their first dealership, and so they have a certain challenge, but they have the performance possibly, but they don't have the capital. So there's the challenge there. And then the second type of first time buyer would be, we're seeing a lot more of are the independent, non-franchised buyers that have and some of these people, they have systems in place that I've seen in their stores that'll rival a lot of new car dealers. I mean, they can be very sophisticated in their BDCs and their follow-up and their marketing. So they can be really good new vehicle franchise dealers. And the parts and service stuff, it might be something that they need to bring in. So in those situations, they may be making a lot of money lately. So they have the capital, but they don't have the experience that other first-time buyer, the general manager that we just said, has. And so there's two differences, capital. And then the third that we see, and we get this a lot too, is like the mega wealthy who decides, they want to get into the car business because it looks like a good return on investment, whether it's private equity or, whatever it is. And that's a different kind of buyer too. So, and the challenges with those buyers are just being able to, pair them with a good operator that can go in and take care of it and make sure that they're in it for the long term as well for the manufacturers. So, but those are like the three types I see: the general manager buying the first time dealership, the independent, and then the very wealthy outside of the industry, I guess I should say, like maybe real estate or investment banking that decide that looks like a good return. So those are the three types, and each one has their own challenges. So,
what is the advice you give for that independent dealer that's got the capital but doesn't have the new vehicle franchise performance experience that can be shared? How do they make headway on that to kind of get an inroad into getting their first new vehicle franchise?
Well, there's a couple ways, I guess. I mean, the real answer, the easy answer is to partner up with that first one, that general manager that has the experience and proven those reports that we talked about at the beginning, the sales efficiency and the customer satisfaction. That's probably the best way, but that's not always feasible. So you don't always, you always say. I also recommend, if it's a really good operator, to have the manufacturer come visit their facilities and show them what they're doing. So they may be able to show the manufacturer like all the different systems and stuff. And like I said, there's some sophisticated, we've had some sophisticated clients recently that do a fantastic job. There were manufacturers that sought out that type of buyer. I mean, I don't know if it still goes on, but at one point in time, Mitsubishi was really good. They saw success, and they came in and worked with a lot of independents that were strong used car operators and made successful dealers out of them. So So it might depend on the type of manufacturer that you're pursuing also. I mean, you probably wouldn't want to go for a tier one luxury, in that deal. But I mean, so those are the recommendations. That would be to partner, with somebody with that experience, and also to have good communication with the manufacturer to show them what you're doing, and also build a nice business plan going forward on what you're going to do. Make sure that's solid and detailed.
Are you seeing where, let's say I'm a buyer and I've got a minority stake financially in a store, and I've got an investor that's got, let's say, 80% of the capital and I've got 20. Are you finding that the manufacturers are pushing back on that, or they're insisting that as the operator with the experience, because I've got an investor without experience, that I have let's call it 51% controlling interest in the business? Is that still a trend that we're seeing from the OEMs?
It is, and it's a good question, because the manufacturers are looking to have long-term stability and somebody in the dealership that controls it on a day-to-day basis, that can operate it, that they can meet with. It's a challenge, because you're talking about a lot of money, and you're talking about who wants to give. I mean, if you're putting, like you said, if somebody's putting in 5 million and you're putting in 1 million, do you really want to give 51% to the million? That's tough to swallow. What it comes down to, and Jamie, you could probably answer this too, in the market rep side, is it's going to come down to how that operating agreement, that management agreement, is written, as far as how much fiduciary responsibility you have, and what you can do. And that's where I think the negotiation comes on those type of deals. And that's where I believe a good automotive attorney that's focused in on this industry, that knows this and who's done this before, is invaluable. So that would be my recommendation on that, would be, and there's, 5, 6, 7 of them that are really good. We work with all of them, that I would recommend that you would partner with in that situation, to make sure that operating agreement is approved by the manufacturer. And each manufacturer will look at it a little different. Toyota might look at it a little bit more different than Stellantis does. So it's important to get that attorney in there. And it is important to show as much as you can long-term stability on that minority partner that has car experience.
Great advice.
Definitely. Okay. So what do you see looking towards the future? Do you see this process evolving at all, or do you think it's going to stay pretty much the same? I'm also hoping that in some cases, like, the technology might improve a little bit, so it's easier for the buyer to just get the documents and everything that's required over to the manufacturer. But whether it's on the technology front or just the process in general, any insights you have?
No, that's a good question. I mean, when you brought that up on technology, that is something that has evolved and changed. The basics, the policy, the management capital facility, that hasn't. I don't see that changing. That hasn't changed. It's been there forever. The debt to equities and the working cap requirements and all of those pieces, I really don't think that's going to evolve or change too much. What are changing? You're right. The technology is changing. It's funny, because General Motors, we did the first one, I think it was 2004. They had an online process, and they came up with that, and then so they still have the same one. It's the same one. That had changed a lot, but it's the same deal. But most manufacturers have done that, are going towards some sort of proprietary application system, which makes sense too, because the documents are secure and everything gets uploaded, and they have visibility at all times. And again, I mean, even though they have visibility, you still have the power of submitting at a certain period of time at the end, once you submit everything. But they can still see, and they can still review for working cap requirements and different things. Yeah, you're right. So the technology probably would continue to evolve, and hopefully it will even become better. But I have not seen a reduction in paperwork or things that the manufacturer. If anything, there's probably more. I mean, because you have all the sign up programs and things, and everybody. This is the best time, right, for the manufacturers to have a dealer to sign up on a program. This is the best time for the manufacturer to ask you to sign up for some of their programs at the time when you're buying the dealership. So that increases the amount of paperwork and the pieces that go with it too. So as far as the industry evolving, different players, and we are seeing other manufacturers coming in, so you obviously have Tesla stores now in there too, up in the deal. But we work on, like I said, I mentioned before, we work on open points. We don't do as many open points anymore because I just don't take them on. It's such a long shot, for somebody, and there's so much time and money and effort that they put into it, and a lot of unless the manufacturer's ready to go into that point, they're few and far between, but they are available. And if the manufacturer solicits a point and says, we're going to come into this market because the demographics are changing or the registrations are changing, that we need it here, then yeah, I mean, that's definitely a good opportunity. And then typically also they're looking for an open point, usually somebody that has familiarity with that brand also. So if you're outside of their brand, that might be more difficult. So there's a lot of things that come in, and while we can take a lot of deals like that, it's just, you don't want to set something up that's not going to work. So we're really careful when we look at open point type packages, but there are new franchises coming on. Ineos has come on for some of our clients, and it's not really a first time. I don't think Ineos is a first time deal, but it is a good one for a dealership that has a good hold in the community and established with community involvement and everything else. Like VinFast might be a good one for one of the new pre-owned non-franchise dealers. I'm seeing a lot of that going on right now with VinFast. I guess Vietnamese. And we've always had, since I've been, there's always been on the horizon a Chinese manufacturer that might come in, and you just never know what's going to happen there either. So, but those are the new things that could come and on the horizon. So maybe new players in there in the franchise system that would be different in the years like. But the criteria, the basics, they're not changing. I don't see them changing. I think we're here to stay on.
Greg, if people wanted to reach out and connect with you, what would be the best way for them to do so?
Oh, well, we can, I guess I could give that information. They could hit our website, apexgroup.net. And I think there's a thing on there where they can hit us on that point. I need to update that website, I guess. But Apex Group, I give my phone number, our office number. Yes, it's 281-419-1951. You can call us. Thank you for inviting me to do this. I really enjoyed it. And I like working with y'all too. It's over the years, and we worked with Paul for many years too. And so, no, I appreciate that.
Fantastic info. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Greg, can't thank you enough for taking the time with us today. Really appreciate it.
You bet. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Okay. Talk to you soon.
All right. We'll see y'all. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Driving Performance. The show notes include links to any resources mentioned in today's show. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode, and leave us a 5-star review. If you're considering buying or selling an automotive dealership, reach out to us at performancebrokerageservices.com or send an email to info@performancebrokerage services.com.